We are gathered here tonight not just to celebrate success, but to acknowledge the inevitable shift of power.
Smiled at the 100 guests gathered beneath the glittering chandeliers. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said smoothly. "But before we begin the celebration, I have an announcement." Adana froze beside him. Something about his voice felt wrong. Too calm. Too rehearsed. She turned slightly toward him. "Michael, what are you doing?" He didn't look at her. Instead, he stared out at the crowd of executives, investors, socialites, and reporters who had come expecting a glamorous anniversary celebration. Phones were already lifted. Recording. "Guys, the story is about to get interesting. Kindly hit the subscribe button so you'll be the first to get notifications when we upload stories like this. Also like and comment where you are watching from." Michael chuckled softly into the microphone. "For 4 years," he continued, "I have been married to a woman who has failed to give me the one thing a man deserves, a child." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread across the ballroom. Adana blinked. Her chest tightened. "Michael, stop," she whispered. But he kept going. "And tonight," he said loudly, "I'm finally correcting that mistake." The ballroom doors opened. A woman stepped inside. Chisholm. Young. Beautiful. And very visibly pregnant. She walked straight toward Michael, resting a possessive hand on his arm. Gasps erupted around the room. Someone whispered loudly, "Is she pregnant?" Another voice answered, "Oh my God, yes." Adana's stomach dropped. Michael lifted Chisholm's hand and kissed it. "This," he announced proudly, "is the mother of my children." Phones lifted higher. Cameras zoomed in. Adana felt like the entire world had suddenly tilted. "Michael," her voice trembled, "you're humiliating me." He finally turned toward her. His smile disappeared. "You humiliated yourself," he said coldly. 4 years of marriage and you couldn't even give me one child." The words struck like knives. Across the room, whispers grew louder. Was she infertile? Maybe that's why he's divorcing her. Poor man. Adana's hands trembled. "You said we would face this together," she whispered. "You promised." Michael laughed harshly. "I promised to build a family," he snapped, "not waste my life waiting for one." Chisholm rested a hand over her stomach. "I'm already 5 months pregnant," she said softly. The crowd erupted in louder murmurs. Adana felt the room spinning. 5 months. Which meant Michael had been cheating long before tonight. Her sister Kayamaka suddenly pushed through the crowd. "Michael, you disgusting coward," she shouted. "You planned this humiliation." Michael shrugged casually. "Adana deserves honesty," he replied, "and now she has it." He turned back toward the guests. "Tonight," he announced loudly, "I am divorcing Adana Ayanquo." The ballroom exploded into shocked noise. Someone whispered, "He's divorcing her publicly." Another guest muttered, "This is brutal." Adana's chest tightened. "Michael, please," she said quietly, "don't do this here." But he was enjoying himself. "You're free now," he continued. "Take your clothes, your jewelry, whatever you want, but my name stays with my children." Chisholm smiled sweetly. "And we'll raise them properly," she added. Adana felt tears burning her eyes. Around the room, phones were recording everything. No one stepped forward. No one defended her. Except a chair scraped loudly from the back of the ballroom. The sound cut through the chaos. Slow footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The crowd turned. A tall man in a dark suit was walking forward. Calm. Unhurried. But something about his presence made the entire room quiet. Guests whispered nervously. "Is that? It can't be. That's Park Ji-yoon." Even Michael's smug expression faltered. Ji-yoon stopped a few feet away. His dark eyes settled on Michael. "You've made quite a spectacle," he said calmly. Michael forced a laugh. Mr. Park, he said stiffly, this is a private matter. Ji-yoon's gaze shifted briefly to Adana. She looked shattered, humiliated, alone. Then he looked back at Michael. Humiliating your wife in front of 100 people, Ji-yoon said quietly. Interesting definition of private. Michael's jaw tightened. This doesn't concern you. Ji-yoon stepped closer. You're mistaken. The room grew so quiet that every breath seemed loud. Ji-yoon's voice remained calm. Your largest loan, he continued, $2.3 million from Crown Capital Partners, is personally guaranteed by my office. Michael's face drained of color. A ripple of shocked whispers spread across the crowd. You're bluffing, Michael snapped. Ji-yoon tilted his head slightly. Am I? Michael's confidence cracked. Chisholm's hand tightened on his arm. What does that mean? She whispered. Ji-yoon looked at Michael without blinking. It means, he said softly, that if I make one phone call tonight, every one of your companies will collapse by morning. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Michael's breathing quickened. You can't threaten me like this, he said. Ji-yoon shrugged. I'm not threatening you. He gestured lightly toward Adana. I'm correcting a mistake. Then he turned toward her. Come with me. Adana stared at him in confusion. What? You don't belong here, Ji-yoon said gently. Michael stepped forward angrily. She's my wife. Ji-yoon's gaze returned to him. For the next few minutes, he said coolly. Then he extended his hand toward Adana. Come. The room watched in stunned silence. Adana hesitated. But then she looked around the ballroom. At the whispering guests. At the cameras. At Michael's cruel smile. And something inside her finally broke. She took Ji-yoon's hand. Gasps erupted. Ji-yoon guided her calmly toward the exit. Michael shouted after them. You think you've won? She's worthless. She couldn't even give me a child. Ji-yoon stopped. He turned slowly. His voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Another word, he said, and I call the bank right now. Michael fell silent. Ji-yoon continued walking. Outside the ballroom doors, the noise of the party faded instantly. Adana's legs suddenly felt weak. She stumbled. Ji-yoon caught her before she could fall. Easy, he said quietly. The cool night air hit her face. And suddenly the tears came. Not gentle tears. Violent sobs. Everything she had held in for 4 years shattered at once. Ji-yoon didn't interrupt. He simply stood beside her, letting her cry. After several minutes, she wiped her eyes shakily. Why did you help me? She asked. Ji-yoon studied her for a moment. Then he said quietly, because no one else did. She stared at him. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. What does that mean? He hesitated briefly. Then he said, it means you deserved better than what happened in there. Adana laughed bitterly. Apparently not. Ji-yoon shook his head. You're wrong. He looked toward the city lights. Sometimes, he said quietly, people only realize someone's worth after they've destroyed them. Adana stared at him. Why were you even there tonight? Ji-yoon's expression became unreadable. Business. Then he looked back at her. Where are you staying tonight? She hesitated. I don't know. Ji-yoon nodded slowly. Then come with me. Adana blinked. What? You need somewhere safe, he said calmly, and I have space. She studied him carefully. You're a stranger. Yes. And you expect me to trust you. No. He opened the door of a waiting black car. I expect you to choose the safest option. She hesitated. Then she glanced back toward the ballroom, where the humiliation was still echoing. Her marriage was over. Her life had just collapsed. And the only person offering help was a stranger. Slowly, she stepped into the car. Ji-yoon closed the door behind her. As the car pulled away from the hotel, Adana stared out the window at the city lights. "Everything is gone," she whispered. Ji-yoon sat beside her quietly. After a moment he said softly, "Not everything." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" Ji-yoon's expression was calm. "It means," he said quietly, "this might be the beginning of something better." Adana shook her head. "You don't understand." Ji-yoon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out at the road ahead. Then he said something that made her chest tighten. "Oh," he said quietly, "I understand more than you think." And neither of them realized that the next few months would change both of their lives forever. The car ride through the city was quiet. Not awkward quiet. Heavy quiet. The kind of silence that settles when a life has just been torn apart. Adana kept staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, and she barely recognized the woman looking back. 4 hours ago, she had believed she was attending a celebration with her husband. Now she was sitting in a stranger's car, leaving behind a marriage that had just exploded in front of 100 witnesses. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Ji-yoon noticed. "You're shaking," he said calmly. "I'm fine," she answered quickly. "You're not." She exhaled slowly. "You saw what happened," she said. "Of course I'm not fine." The car slowed as they approached a tall building overlooking the river. Security gates opened immediately when the vehicle arrived. Adana frowned slightly. "This is where you live?" Ji-yoon nodded. The car entered a private underground garage. 2 security guards immediately stepped forward as Ji-yoon exited the car. "Good evening, sir." "Evening." Ji-yoon opened the passenger door for Adana. She stepped out slowly, still taking in everything around her. The elevator opened directly into a massive penthouse. Glass walls revealed the entire city skyline, glowing beneath the night sky. Adana stopped walking. "This place is enormous." Ji-yoon walked inside like it was nothing unusual. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing toward the living room. Adana sank onto the couch. Everything still felt unreal. Ji-yoon poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "Drink," he said. She took it. Her hands were still shaking. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked suddenly. Ji-yoon sat across from her. "Why does kindness require a reason?" She looked at him carefully. "Because strangers don't usually intervene in scandals like that." Ji-yoon's lips curved slightly. "That wasn't a scandal." "What do you call it then?" "Cruelty." Adana looked down. The memories of the ballroom replayed in her mind. Michael's voice. The laughter. The cameras. Her chest tightened again. "He was already planning it," she whispered. Ji-yoon said nothing. 5 months pregnant, she continued quietly. "That means he was cheating almost the entire year." Her voice cracked. "And he still stood beside me at dinners, meetings, parties." She shook her head slowly. "How stupid was I?" Ji-yoon's voice cut in calmly. "You weren't stupid." Adana laughed bitterly. "I stayed loyal to a man who replaced me." "That makes you honest," Ji-yoon replied. She looked up at him. "And honesty isn't stupidity." She stared at him for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been building in her mind. "Why were you really there tonight?" Ji-yoon leaned back slightly. "I told you, business." "With Michael?" "Yes." "Then why humiliate him like that?" Ji-yoon paused briefly. Then he said quietly, "Because men like him only understand consequences." Adana studied his face. "You really could destroy his companies." "Yes." Her eyes widened. "Just like that. Just like that." Silence filled the room again. Finally she said softly, "You didn't do it." "No." "Why?" Ji-yoon shrugged slightly. He's already destroying himself. Adana let out a small breath. For the first time that night, a faint smile touched her face. You're strange. Ji-yoon smiled faintly. I've been called worse. Hours passed quietly after that. Adana eventually fell asleep on the couch without realizing it. When she woke up, sunlight was pouring through the glass walls. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. Then everything came rushing back. Her divorce. The humiliation. Michael. She sat up quickly. The penthouse was quiet, but the smell of coffee drifted through the air. She followed it toward the kitchen. Ji-yoon was standing there calmly making coffee. You're awake, he said without turning. Adana blinked. How did you know? You walk lightly when you're nervous. She frowned slightly. Is that supposed to make sense? Probably not. He handed her a cup. Coffee helps. She took a sip. Thank you. They sat across from each other quietly. Finally, Ji-yoon spoke. What are your plans? Adana stared at her coffee. I don't have any. You'll need some. She sighed. My life was built around my marriage. That's common. Now it's gone. Ji-yoon nodded slowly. Then build a new one. Adana looked up. That sounds simple. It isn't, he said. But it's possible. She thought for a moment. Then she said something surprising. I had a bucket list. Ji-yoon raised an eyebrow. A bucket list. Things I always wanted to do. Why didn't you? Michael always said they were a waste of time. Ji-yoon leaned back. What kind of things? She hesitated. Then she smiled shyly. Travel alone. Eat street food without worrying about appearances. Climb a cliff outside the city I used to visit as a teenager. Ji-yoon nodded slowly. Those sound reasonable. They sounded ridiculous to Michael. Ji-yoon stood up. Get dressed. She blinked. Why? We're starting your list. Her eyes widened. Right now. Yes. She laughed nervously. You're serious? Yes. She studied him carefully. Why are you doing this? Ji-yoon shrugged slightly. Because you deserve one good day after last night. Something about that answer warmed her chest. 2 hours later, they were walking through a busy open-air market. Adana stared around in disbelief. This place is chaotic. Ji-yoon handed her a small skewer of grilled meat. Try it. She laughed. I've never eaten street food before. You're about to. She took a bite cautiously. Then her eyes widened. This is amazing. Ji-yoon smiled slightly. For the first time since the ballroom incident, Adana laughed freely. They spent the afternoon wandering through the city. Talking. Trying new foods. Watching street performers. At one point, Adana stopped suddenly. You know what's strange? What? I forgot about Michael for almost an hour. Ji-yoon nodded. That's progress. She looked at him thoughtfully. You're very calm. I try to be. Nothing seems to surprise you. Ji-yoon smiled faintly. That's not true. What surprises you? He looked at her. You. She blinked. Why? Because most people would have hidden after what happened last night. And I did. No. You dragged me out of that ballroom. Yes, he admitted. But you chose to stand back up today. Adana smiled slightly. I guess I did. The sun was beginning to set when they reached the cliff overlooking the city. Adana stepped toward the edge slowly. This is my favorite place, she said. You came here often. Before I got married. She inhaled deeply as the wind brushed her face. I forgot how peaceful this feels. Ji-yoon stood beside her quietly. The city lights began turning on below. Adana glanced at him. You're very mysterious. Am I? Yes. Is that a problem? She smiled softly. Not yet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then suddenly, Ji-yoon's expression tightened. His hand pressed briefly against his chest. Adana noticed immediately. Are you okay? Ji-yoon nodded quickly. Just tired. Are you sure? Yes. But a few seconds later, he swayed slightly. Adana stepped forward. Ji-yoon. His vision blurred. The last thing he heard before everything went dark was Adana shouting his name. Ji-yoon. Ji-yoon. Adana caught his arm just as his knees buckled. For a terrifying second, she thought he was about to fall straight over the cliff edge. Hey, stay with me, she shouted, grabbing him with both hands. Ji-yoon's body had suddenly gone heavy. His breathing was shallow. His eyes fluttered, trying to stay open. Adana's heart slammed against her chest. Ji-yoon, look at me. He tried to speak, but the words barely came out. I'm fine. You are not fine. Panic surged through her. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and dialed the emergency number. Yes, please, someone collapsed. He's unconscious. Yes, we're at the city overlook near River Point. Please hurry. Ji-yoon's head tilted slightly against her shoulder. His skin felt strangely cold. Adana tightened her grip. Stay with me, she whispered desperately. Sirens arrived faster than she expected. Paramedics rushed toward them. What happened? He just collapsed, Adana said quickly. 1 second he was standing and the next. They gently laid Ji-yoon onto a stretcher. Pulse is weak, one paramedic muttered. Adana's stomach twisted. Is he going to be okay? We're taking him to St. Matthew's Medical Center. They lifted him into the ambulance. Adana climbed in immediately. The ride felt like forever. Machines beeped softly while the paramedics worked around him. Adana stared at Ji-yoon's pale face. He looked so different now. The calm, composed man from earlier was gone. Now he looked fragile. Her chest tightened. Why did that scare her so much? She barely knew him. Yet the thought of losing him suddenly made her stomach twist. The ambulance finally pulled into the hospital. Doctors were already waiting. Clear the hallway. They rushed Ji-yoon through the emergency doors. Adana tried to follow. A nurse stopped her gently. Ma'am, please wait here. But they'll take care of him. The doors closed. Adana stood there frozen. The hospital waiting room felt cold and too bright. Minutes stretched into hours. Her mind replayed the day again and again. The ballroom. The humiliation. Ji-yoon stepping forward. His calm voice. His steady presence. And now, he was lying somewhere behind those doors. Finally, a doctor approached. Ms. Adana. She stood up immediately. Yes. I'm Dr. Matsuda. How is he? The doctor hesitated. Mr. Park is stable right now. Adana exhaled slightly. But, the doctor continued. Her heart dropped again. What? Were you aware of his condition? Adana frowned. What condition? Dr. Matsuda looked surprised. He didn't tell you. Tell me what? The doctor spoke carefully. Mr. Park has advanced leukemia. The words landed like a physical blow. Adana blinked. I'm sorry, what? Acute leukemia, the doctor repeated gently. She stared at him in disbelief. That's not possible. I'm afraid it is. Her voice rose slightly. He looked perfectly healthy. Leukemia can be deceptive in early stages. Adana shook her head slowly. No, there must be some mistake. Dr. Matsuda sighed softly. There is. How long has he had it? Almost a year. Her breath caught. A year. Yes. Adana's voice dropped to a whisper. How bad is it? The doctor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked quietly, did he tell you his prognosis? No. Dr. Matsuda looked down briefly. Then he said the words that shattered the room. 6 months. Adana's knees nearly gave out. 6 months. Possibly less. The world seemed to tilt. That's impossible, she whispered. I'm sorry. Tears filled her eyes. He never said anything. He tends to keep his condition private. Adana wiped her face quickly. Can I see him? Dr. Matsuda nodded. Yes, but he'll still be weak. A nurse guided her down the hallway. The hospital room was quiet. Ji-yoon lay on the bed, pale but awake. His dark eyes shifted toward the door as she entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adana stepped closer slowly. You collapsed, she said quietly. Ji-yoon gave a faint smile. Clearly. Why didn't you tell me? His smile faded. I didn't want to ruin the day. Her chest tightened. The doctor told me. Ji-yoon sighed softly. I assumed he would. She pulled a chair beside the bed. You've had leukemia for a year. Yes. And you never thought to mention that while dragging me around the city. Ji-yoon looked at her calmly. You needed one good day. Her eyes filled with tears again. You almost died on that cliff. He shrugged slightly. Not yet. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. Silence filled the room. Finally, Adana asked the question that had been echoing in her mind. How long do you really have? Ji-yoon hesitated. Then he answered honestly. 6 months. Her throat tightened. And you're just okay with that? He looked at the ceiling for a moment. I've had time to think about it. But you're only 39. Yes. You run multiple companies. Yes. And you're just accepting it. Ji-yoon turned his head toward her. What would you suggest I do? I don't know, she snapped. Fight. I am fighting. Then why give up? He studied her quietly. I'm not giving up, he said softly. I'm choosing how to spend the time I have left. Adana looked away. Tears rolled down her cheeks. This isn't fair. Ji-yoon's voice was gentle. Life rarely is. She wiped her face again. Why did you help me? Ji-yoon seemed slightly surprised by the question. Because it was the right thing to do. No, she insisted. There has to be more than that. He hesitated. Then he admitted quietly, you reminded me of someone. Who? My younger sister. Adana blinked. What happened to her? She died. The room went still. Leukemia, he added softly. Adana's chest tightened again. So when I saw what Michael was doing to you. You saw her, Adana finished. Ji-yoon nodded. Yes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adana said quietly, you saved me. Ji-yoon smiled faintly. You saved me too. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? For a few hours today, he said calmly, I forgot I was dying. Adana stared at him. The weight of those words settled heavily in her chest. Finally, she said softly, you shouldn't face this alone. Ji-yoon looked at her. You barely know me. That didn't stop you from helping me. He studied her expression carefully. You don't have to stay involved in this, he said. I know. You should rebuild your life. I will. Then why stay here? Adana hesitated. Because the answer scared her. But she said it anyway. Because you're the first person who treated me like I mattered. Ji-yoon looked at her quietly. The hospital room fell silent again. Finally, he said something unexpected. Then stay. Adana's heart skipped. For how long? Ji-yoon's voice was calm. For as long as you want. She looked at him. At the IV lines. At the machines. at the quiet strength in his eyes. And something inside her made a decision. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. The first time Adana felt it, she thought it was just grief. A strange wave of nausea that rolled through her body early one morning. She stood in the kitchen of the quiet apartment Ji-yoon had insisted she move into after their marriage, staring at the coffee cup in her hand. The smell suddenly made her stomach twist. She rushed to the sink. After several minutes, the feeling passed. But a strange thought lingered in her mind. 3 weeks later, sitting in a doctor's office, her hands trembled slightly. The doctor looked at the test results again. Then she smiled gently. "Congratulations," she said. Adana blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You're pregnant." The words hung in the air. Adana stared at her. "That's impossible." The doctor turned the monitor slightly. The small image on the screen showed a tiny heartbeat. "About 8 weeks," the doctor explained. Adana's breath caught. 8 weeks. Her mind immediately calculated the timeline. 8 weeks meant the night after their wedding. Tears suddenly filled her eyes. Ji-yoon had only been gone for 3 weeks. And yet part of him was still here. She left the hospital slowly, one hand resting over her stomach. For the first time since Ji-yoon's funeral, something inside her chest shifted. Hope. But hope came with fear. Raising a child alone. Facing the world that had once humiliated her. And raising the son of a man whose empire was worth billions. It was terrifying. But she remembered something Ji-yoon had said on the beach. Sometimes the time we have is enough to change everything. 9 months later, Adana held a newborn boy in her arms. He had Ji-yoon's eyes. Calm. Quiet. Observant. "What will you name him?" Kayamaka asked softly. Adana looked down at the baby. Ji-yoon Valentine Park. Kayamaka smiled gently. "That's perfect." The years that followed were not easy. Raising a child alone rarely is. But Adana never truly felt alone. Ji-yoon had left more than memories behind. Marcus, Ji-yoon's attorney, became one of her closest allies. He helped manage the companies Ji-yoon had built. Yun, Ji-yoon's loyal head of security, visited frequently. And slowly, Adana began to understand the depth of the man she had married. Ji-yoon had quietly arranged everything before he died. Trust funds, business protections, education plans, even letters. Letters written for moments in the future. One night when her son was 5 years old, Adana opened the first one. The envelope was labeled carefully. "Open when our son turns 5. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Ji-yoon's handwriting was neat and steady. "Adana, if you're reading this, then our son is 5 years old now. I imagine he asks a lot of questions. I hope he laughs often, and I hope he inherited your courage. I know raising him alone won't be easy, but I also know something about you that you might not realize. You're stronger than anyone who ever doubted you. Tell him about the ocean. Tell him about the cliff where you used to find peace. And tell him that his father loved his mother more than anything in the world." Adana wiped her tears as she folded the letter. Her son ran into the room. "Mom, look what I built." He held up a small tower made of blocks. She smiled. "That's amazing." "Is Dad proud of me?" he asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. She knelt beside him. "Yes," she said softly. "How do you know?" "Because he loved you before you were even born." The boy smiled. That night, Adana realized something important. Ji-yoon's time had been short, but his impact had not. Years passed. The little boy grew into a thoughtful young man. At 15, he was already taller than his mother. At 18, he graduated at the top of his class. At 22, he stepped into the headquarters of Crown Capital Partners for the first time as its new executive chairman. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. Some of the older executives whispered quietly. He looks exactly like Ji-yoon. Adana watched from the back of the room. Her heart filled with pride. Her son walked confidently to the head of the table. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I'm Ji-yoon Valentine Park." The room grew quiet. "I know many of you worked with my father," he continued. "And I intend to honor everything he built." One of the senior board members leaned forward. "Your father would be proud." The young man nodded slightly. "I hope so." Later that evening, he drove to the quiet cliff overlooking the ocean. Adana was already standing there. She smiled when she saw him. "Long day." "Very." They walked to the edge together. The city lights glittered in the distance. "This was your father's favorite view," Adana said softly. "I know." "How?" "He wrote about it in the letters." She looked at him. "You've been reading them." "Marcus gave them to me last year." He pulled a small folded paper from his pocket. One of them was addressed to me. Adana's chest tightened. "What did it say?" He smiled slightly. "He told me to take care of you." Tears filled her eyes. "That sounds like him." They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, he walked toward the small stone marker nearby. Ji-yoon Park. Beloved son. Visionary leader. Loving husband. He placed a single white flower on the grave. "I hope I'm doing okay," he said quietly. Adana stood beside him. "You are." The wind moved gently through the grass. And for a moment, it almost felt like Ji-yoon was still there with them. Watching. Proud. Because some stories don't end when someone dies. Some stories continue through the lives they touched. Through the love they left behind. Through the families they built. And sometimes the greatest legacy a person leaves isn't money or power. It's the courage they inspire in the people who carry their name. If this story touched your heart, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories like this to life. Stay tuned for part 2.